Yogaha Karmasu Kaushalam.
Namaskar. I am Professor Dr. Jagdish Joshi, Professor and Director of UGC Human Resource Development Center of Gujarat University. Friends, I would like to introduce you to a versatile personality. He is Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi. He is the head of School of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences at Oro University, Surat, India. He is also the Deputy Chair of International Research Group, Challenging Precarity, a global network. He sits on the advisory board of International Journal of Post-Colonial Writing, London, Routledge. Dwivedi is the author of Reorientalism and Indian Writing in English by Palgrave, UK. He has authored a number of books, but I would like to name a few. They are Human Rights and Post-Colonial India by Routledge, UK and India, and Indian Writing in English and Global Literary Market by Palgrave, UK. His latest publication includes a special issue of Journal of Post-Colonial Writing on Challenging Precarity, co-edited with Janet Wilson from Routledge, London. I would like to welcome him to deliver his speech, to deliver his session on curriculum design and learning outcomes. Friends, when it comes to curriculum design and learning outcomes, he has a vast experience of designing various curriculums. He has designed curriculums for liberal studies, for English compulsory, and for various other subjects related to English. He has been a part of curriculum design at various universities and various institutions. I really feel very happy to invite him to talk on the topic which he has worked a lot. So over to Om Prakash Dwivedi ji.
Hello and welcome to the UGC sponsored Guru Dakshita Faculty Development Program. I, Dr. Om Prakash Dwivedi, Head School of Liberal Arts and Human Sciences, Oro University, Surat, thank the UGC Human Resource Development Center of Gujarat University for giving me an opportunity to connect with you and deliver my session on the topic Curriculum Designing and Outcome-Based Learning. I thank Professor Dr. Jagdish Joshi, Professor and Director of the UGC HRDC of Gujarat University. It has always been a pleasure to work with him and learn from his scholarship. The HRDC of Gujarat University, led by Professor Joshi, needs to be congratulated for thinking of the first of its kind online refresher course in India, which started in the year 2018-19 and since then has catered to as many as 900 participants till date. The topic of my presentation, as I told you earlier, is curriculum designing and outcome-based learning. This presentation will be divided into two parts. While the first part pertains basically with the theoretical models and the do's and the don'ts of curriculum designing and outcome-based learning, my second part basically concerns with the process involved in the curriculum designing and outcome-based learning. Any discussion pertaining to curriculum designing must begin with the following questions. A, what is to be taught? B, why is it to be taught? C, how is it to be taught? And one may as well include the spatial question, where is it to be taught? A spatial question is important because a classroom consists of students coming from diverse cultural and economical backgrounds. A good or interactive curriculum is integral to any teaching learning system since it lays out a blueprint for future pathway. Curriculum designing is the process of planning, processing, and evaluating as reflected in the PPT, which shows the model laid down by Connie K. Chung, Associate Director of the Harvard Global School of Education, and he points out, I quote, the curriculum emphasizes pedagogy, focusing on how you teach, not just what you teach. Advancing Chung's view, Reimers, the faculty director of international education policy at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, points out that, and I quote from the PPT, a curriculum ideally should give young people the knowledge they need to approach the future with a dynamic, accountable, forward-thinking mindset, unquote. In a way, it can be said that the curriculum design is the destination which can be approached through a correct blend of contents, methodology, and pedagogy. Identifying the right contents in accordance with the learning outcomes, incorporating a methodology which can ensure a flow of contents towards the identified learners, and the subsequent use of pedagogical tools through which the methodology could be implemented, may mark a smooth progress towards attaining the learning outcomes. There exist several models of curriculum design, but due to the paucity of time, I will be taking up only Bloom's taxonomy and didactic triangle with a view to locate the shortcomings and also suggest a different paradigm of integral model of curriculum and education. Benjamin Bloom, as you can see on the PPT, developed a very popular cognitive framework for learning process way back in 1956, and ever since it has attained a touchstone model for higher education. It was subsequently revised though by famous psychologist Lauren Ederson in the year 2001. However, the revised framework contained minor changes with a basic focus on how to align the model with the change of time and the learning skills. So here are the two models, Bloom's taxonomy, the original model, and the original model is this model, let me explain it before I go to the PPT. It is a model which keeps a track of a continuous progress, starting from the bottom and going to the top, that is the product or the evaluation what Bloom's identifies. So it starts with knowledge, the primary step required in the learning outcome. Then it proceeds to the comprehension part, followed by application, which becomes the third stage. And then moving on to the fourth stage, it covers the analysis. Then the fifth part, which demands an approach or an ability to synthesize the learning acquired. And then ending in the last stage, that is the evaluation stage, where the teacher evaluates the learning acquired by learners. However, the model, as I pointed out, suffered few drawbacks. And the drawback was that Bloom had made it a very hierarchical model, a very linear kind of a model. And an education system which focuses more on linearity or more on hierarchy is bound to fail. So, considering this aspect, this drawback, the famous psychologist Lauren Ederson in 2001 gave it a revise. So Lauren Ederson comes up with a revised model of Bloom's taxonomy in the year 2001. It was not a major revision. Basically, what Ederson did was to replace the two categories existing in the model, and the two categories were the first one, that is the primary one found at the base, that is the knowledge, which Ederson replaces with remembering. And then the second category was the last stage, which was the evaluation, and Ederson replaces this evaluation system with the process of creation. So Ederson focuses more on the ability of his students to create, to apply and to test their knowledge skills This becomes evident if one examines Anderson's model carefully. So the model starts with remembering being the first stage, and when I say remembering is the act to remember, to recall the facts and basic concepts acquired during the learning process. Then moving on to the second stage, that is the understanding phase. One needs to have a proper awareness of the concepts acquired. A learner should be able to classify, describe, and discuss as well as explain the concepts and terminologies acquired during the learning process. Then moving on to the third stage, that is the application stage, the learners must exhibit the ability to demonstrate their learning acquired in the classroom. So this becomes a kind of a experiential learning. Then we move on to the fourth stage in the Anderson's taxonomy, that is the ability to analyze. And when I say the ability to analyze, it means that ability to draw connections, to seek parallels among ideas. So one should be able to not only differentiate but also to organize, to reconnect, to integrate different models of different theoretical models in the learning system, and then examine, experiment, and question, and as well as test the learning acquired. Then we move on to the next process, which is the fifth one, and this brings us to the process of evaluation, which reflects on a learner's ability to justify a stand or a decision. Decision making is the most important aspect in any curriculum design, because decision making reflects the student's ability to demonstrate something very convincingly, and it also emphasizes the way in which a student can show his or her development. And then it leads to the final stage as per Anderson, that is the stage of creation. And the stage of creation is the ability to produce new or original ideas. So in total, one can say that Anderson's model was didn't mark a very radical shift from Bloom's taxonomy. However, with the change of time, changes are required in theoretical frameworks as well. And taking this into consideration, Anderson made some significant changes to the Bloom's taxonomy. Without taking away the merits and the usefulness of Bloom's model, which of course gives way to a balanced approach to learning skills, one must also be able to see through the shortcomings. As one could see from the two figures which I have just shown you through the PPT, the taxonomy recommends a hierarchical or linear model of learning. This means that each step is important to reach the learning outcome. The moment any hierarchy exists in the learning system, it kills the very essence and purpose of learning. There cannot be just one way learning approach either for the curriculum design or for the learning outcome. Each individual or learner has to follow his her own path and methodology depending on the cognitive skills. Socrates knew this, and that's why he famously gripped to his innocence throughout his life. And he goes on to say, and I quote, "I know one thing, that I know nothing," unquote. In the same way, curriculum design must emphasize the ability to prioritize creation rather than a strict or delimited procedural learning. A good curriculum, according to Indian educationist, late Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh, should prepare for a learner's development from carrying a ration card to making him qualify to hold a passport so as to compete at the global level. To put it in other words, and exhibited in the PPT, a student enters the higher education system with the knowledge acquired at the school level. And then it has another drawback, because not all learners will exhibit or possess the same level of learning. So one needs to cater to them in very different ways and very subtle ways. So the kind of entry, the kind of knowledge with which they enter the higher education model can be seen, according to Professor Avdesh Kumar Singh, as a ration card. And therefore, it is the job of the teachers or instructors to prepare them in such a way that their ration cards could be converted into a passport in the domain of higher education. Curriculum should always have the flexibility of changing the contents and the pedagogy to meet learners' demands. Contents should never be offered as a fixed frame of knowledge to be learned and acquired, because we all believe that there cannot be anything known as the knowledge, but as an array of possibilities to be arrived at and explored through continuous interactions and reasoning methods. This reinforces the argument that in any curriculum design, a provision must exist to practice inductive learning rather than a deductive approach. And this brings me back to the kind of a learning model that is being developed at Stanford these days, where the aim is to get away with major and minors and rather focus on the mission of the student. So each student will have different mission. Someone may want to become a photographer, someone may want to become an engineer. So the task of the educator then becomes more complicated. And therefore, if we narrow it down and say, for example, see it from within the domain of liberal arts, then if we have students whose demands are different, say for example, one student wants to become a writer, and another one wants to become a teacher, and the third one wants to become a counselor, a psychologist, then it becomes the job of the instructors to frame the curriculum in such a way that it is not only ever evolving, but it has the provision to keep on updating the curriculum throughout the course. So what I'm talking or what I'm recommending is that in the curriculum design, a provision must exist that one could have the freedom to play with the curriculum. But when I use the word play, it doesn't mean that I have to distort or downplay the quality of the curriculum. Rather, the realignment must be done in accordance with the demands of the learners. So it is for this reason that both the teachers and the contents need to be in a state of ever evolving, but in accordance, what I said, with the learning outcomes of the learners. Rudolf Kunjli's model of didactic triangle, as you can see in this PPT, despite being a very efficient one, failed due to its inability to identify the importance of learners. Rather, it prioritized and almost fixed the contents, thus making it a top-down approach where neither the teacher nor the learner has any flexibility to experiment. As you see, the content is on the top, and then the content is divided. It is catered to both the teachers as well as the learners. So it is the content, it is the top-down approach where content decides what the teacher needs to teach and what are the expectations of the students. This therefore couldn't work. Teacher, rather, I suggest, should be a charioteer for her learners. The learning outcome of learners must be taken care by the driving skills of the charioteer to take them to their destination and thus prepare them for life. Hence, any fixed content won't be able to cater to the needs of learners. and the purpose of learning outcomes will be defeated. Commenting on the drawback of this learning model, Christina Eld Molstad and Berit Karseth piercingly remark that the didactic model deals with the following three questions. A, what is to be taught? B, how is content to be taught and learned? And C, why is content to be taught and learned? A point to be considered while designing the curriculum is the freedom given both to teachers and learners to determine the contents and pedagogy. It must always give space to democratic form of a learning model with emphasis on enabling the competency level of learners. One may see the entire learning process through the metaphors of exploration and discovery, and therefore the curriculum needs to be inclined more towards experiential learning and to ensure learning outcomes. Each curriculum must have different components of teaching which could be divided among listening, seeing and doing, or as reflected in the famous verse from the Gita, and I quote, "Gyan janne mein nahi, vaisa ho jane mein hai," which means that knowledge doesn't exist in the act of knowing, rather in becoming one. So learning, what this is reflecting is, what this suggests rather I should say, is that learning should be reflected in the existence of an individual in his or her daily life. Eric Ryan makes a remarkable point while emphasizing the role of critical thinking in curriculum development. You can see this on the PPT. Elder and Paul define critical thinking as that mode of thinking about any subject, content, or problem in which the thinker improves the quality of his or her thinking by skillfully taking charge of the structures inherent in thinking and imposing intellectual standards upon them. This leads to an awareness and also subsequent development of skills which are very much required in this rapidly changing world. Ryan situates the learning process within the context of an effective methodology of content delivery. In order to produce a suitable content for any given model, Ryan advocates a spirit of critical thinking among teachers and learners. In order to substantiate my point, Ryan builds on the way Lippmann prioritizes the method used to approach the content, and you can see his quotation here. A dialogue that tries to conform to logic, it moves forward indirectly like a boat tacking into the wind, but in the process, its progress comes to resemble that of thinking itself. So it's a continuous process where thinking is happening throughout. Consequently, when this process is internalized or introjected by the participants, they come to think in moves that resemble its procedures. They come to think as the process thinks. So there is a kind of parallel going on between thinking, learning, and becoming aware of the act. What emerges in this paragraph is the importance of critical thinking and the way it links learners to immerse with the process seamlessly, yet being fully aware of the changes in learning and procedural approaches to outcome. A student's mastery of learning must be prioritized, and the centrality of the learner and measurable learning outcomes must be the statement of any curriculum design. Seen from this direction, knowledge becomes subordinate to learning outcomes, as pointed out by Ellis et al. In the year 2009. Learning outcomes need to be reflected in the competence and skills acquired by learners over a period of time. This brings me to the end of the first part of my presentation. In the next part of my presentation, I shall be focusing on the frameworks and the process of curriculum design and learning outcomes. Thank you.